Hello class. Per request from some of your classmates, I've decided to make today's outline into a video in preparation for our test tomorrow based off of the development of China's new economy. As we see here in the introduction, the Song Dynasty is the primary dynasty that we're looking at from approximately 960 to 1279 CE. Major changes occurred in agriculture. We've seen some new inventions in terms of tools that were used, so the harrow, the chain pump, as well as just the overall production of agriculture increased. Trade and commerce also flourished, and again, to reiterate, the boom in production of rice, in many reasons that's because of the new strain of rice that came from Southeast Asia, which allowed crops to be resistant to drought and helped it so that they could be produced multiple times a year. Lastly, Marco Polo, and I always like discussing Marco Polo with China because it's questionable of whether he actually went and served on Kublai Khan's court. So I always will require you or ask you to use caution when Marco Polo is studied in the context of China. Urbanization, crowded cities, bustling markets, so we talked about that a little bit the other day, and then the boat traffic on the Grand Canal as a result of trade and commerce really began to pick up. Next, we transition over to changes in agriculture, and we look at three main categories: reasons for agricultural change, characteristics of new agriculture, and results of agricultural change. So first, under reasons for agricultural change, we look at northern China was the wealthiest and most popular part of the country. But the main transition that is worth noting is the movement of farmers to basins. The primary reason we have to remember is the Mongolians. We know that they frequently attacked China, and the farmers got tired of having their lands raided and taken over by the Mongols and decided that moving to the warmer southern China where rice could be grown instead of the traditional wheat and millet that they had produced would be a better option. We also see fertilizer starting to be used. So those are just a couple of the reasons for agricultural change. Here under characteristics, we see small farms, suitable land, flooded fields, and terraced hillsides. These were frequent spots where rice was grown. They also utilized buffaloes to pull the plows and flatten the fields. Lastly, some of the kind of architectural designs that helped agriculture. We see dams, diked, gated channels, chain pumps, which helped, again, remove water from the paddies and instead dump that water on a flat plateau. And we see the production of tea, cotton, sugar, mulberry trees, which we know are utilized to make silk, and of course, rice. So 3, we see the results of agricultural change. We see that rice production increases, and as a result, a larger population is then supported. That's one of the major connections between agriculture and urbanization that we've talked about. And lastly, we see the creation of kind of these wonderful or more creative and delicate items: silk, cloth, the jade cup that was in the PowerPoint. Those become kind of highlighted a little bit more because luxury goods were then desired after people had what they needed. So here we look at the growth of trade and commerce. First, reasons for growth in trade and commerce. So we see wealthy landowners, as I was just talking about, were eager to buy luxuries. So this resulted in trade becoming more prosperous and continuing to develop cities and markets inside of China. Next, we see busy boat owners had plenty of business. So because the canals and the channels were always bustling with boats moving to and from various places, trade via ocean, which we'll learn a little bit more about, or trade via river or sea, became much popular, and we'll look a little bit more in depth with that probably tomorrow night. So some of the characteristics of China's commercial growth: government controlled the amount of paper that is available. Something that's always important to keep in mind with our paper money is that the value of it is only as good as what is commonly accepted. So we've talked about that a couple times. Again, emphasizing the town markets that have existed. Lastly, we'll look at the results of growth in trade and commerce, and the merchant class, which I liken to the middle class, grew as a result of trade and commerce and agricultural kind of flourishing. This meant that there's less people kind of in poverty, but that middle class grew, and also the upper class as well. So that's where we saw, in terms of the upper class, where more cultural aspects of China were emphasized: painting, art, clockmaking later on, which we'll look at in terms of our inventions. Just a reminder, our test is tomorrow, so to study. That is crucial in order for you guys to do well. Same structure as last time: a multiple choice, one open response. Now we get over to urbanization. So we see the reasons for urbanization. So the growth of commerce encouraged people to move into the city and towns. Of course, makes sense to move to a city if a job's available. You enjoy the atmosphere. So that's one of the major reasons why urbanization began to occur. As always, linking back to our food, there was enough rice and other goods to support them. We see that people can make living and a good living as a merchant, trader, shopkeeper, peddler, whatever it may be. So there were jobs where you couldn't only get by, but you could flourish in Chinese society. As a result of this growth of cities, China's cities became larger and more complex than any that had existed at this time, and this is remarkable considering Europe within the next couple of years really begins to develop. So that's important to keep in mind, is that the size of Chinese cities at times got up to around the 2 million mark, whereas in Europe 50,000 was basically the peak at this time. Again, we go into our characteristics of cities. Streets were filled with rich landowners. Unfortunately, one of the things that happened as a result of this kind of development in China was that the role of women was kind of marginalized. Women became viewed as inferior to men, as we learned about a little bit through Confucius' teachings. So that is kind of becomes apparent again. So results of urbanization, cities become vibrant centers of activity. So not just the buying and selling of goods, but also cities as places to visit, to play games, whatever it may be. They kind of stimulate people outside of just the buying and selling. So that's kind of the quick recap for us. We breezed through urbanization. We'll head back now, just a quick view. C, the growth of trade and commerce. B, changes in agriculture, and A, our introduction. Just keep in mind, guys, the connections between these three are important to keep in mind, and will likely be a part of the test tomorrow in some type of graphic organizer type format. If you have any questions for me, let me know. As always, take care. Bye now.